still my... Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice, and today we're diving into the world of video game playing. And my guest is a committed hobbyist. Raphael, Luis, welcome to the show.
Hi, Eve. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure because this is something I've been fascinated by for over 20 years, really, since I first saw someone who actually was in an Air Force base playing video games like his whole free time. And that was at least 25 years ago. And, it was a big, bulky, bigger than TV kind of setup. So it dominated the living room, I remember. And I remember feeling then this connection between, military training and video gaming. And all that has happened from then to now, the huge growth in gaming and especially the explosion during COVID has only reinforced actually my point of view. But I want to get the insider's knowledge from you, the inside intel. So, before I asking you my questions, before I start, I want to share some of the latest data. So more than 2 billion people play video games globally every week, including over 150 million in the US. And 64% of Americans are gamers, and the average male gamer is 33. But really, the span seems to be, well, if we count only adults, 18 to 45. And then it seems that from 45 till, antiquity, men like to watch TV and movies, right? So there is a very sharp, distinction in these age groups when it comes to their main source of entertainment. And I find that, fascinating when it comes to the future we're in right now, right? 2020, because this mass population of gamers, is inevitably going to take over governing the country and, hopefully more than just America. And will that change things and how? They have definitely been, enjoying a different relationship with the screen than the previous generation, the McLuhan generation that was kind of passively watching the screen. In 1999, the industry generated 7.4 billion in revenue, 131 billion in 2018, and the expectation is 300 billion by 2025, right? So people aged 15 to 24 were the ones who played the most. And that would be, about 20 minutes a day, just for fun, on average. I'm going to say people 18 to 29, 43% of them played online. But in general, again, in 2018, when the last major study was done, over 166 million adults played, sometimes daily. So, they say that about half of these people play on their computers, half play, on their mobile phones. So it's just, and the average is about 7 hours a week. Again, speaking completely in stats and averages. And I think that these numbers have grown a lot in 2020, but we don't really have the statistics yet, at least not officially. But video games are becoming both the leading form of entertainment, at least, for men, but I think for all genders. And also an integral part of American culture in a way that's not officially recognized that much, the way TVs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
as the way that sports are as
Or
well.
sports, right?
There's a huge debate about esports, and which is just sports for video gamers, and whether that's considered a sport, and whether colleges or like NCAA is going to start having esports, and whether they're going to give scholarships for esports. These are all things that are up for debate, and I think it's the interactiveness of video games that is such a draw for people, and we see more and more and more technology in general just being so present in our lives. I mean, we have a supercomputer in our hand. Everybody has a supercomputer in their hand, and video games just bring a level of interactiveness that just passively watching a screen, I think, is doesn't bring. And I think that draw can be seen in the numbers that you just mentioned with money. I remember when a video game called Grand Theft Auto 5 first came out. Forgot exactly what year, but it grossed like over $2 billion in a weekend. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
This thing was kind of unheard of, and the numbers are just going up and up and up, and every big game that comes out seems to smash the record that was set before. So,
like this Among Us is like number 5 in popularity, let's say. So there are games that you play where you don't have to have your friends there that are still popular. So I think there is more. What it's more like the active. It's the but more the active. Whereas the TV is completely passive, right?
Yeah.
The movie, you just a blob sitting there, not participating.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, Among Us is a whole that's a
a whole other topic, which we'll get into the details. And by the way, I read that something like 39% of players would like to play professionally if they could find a way to support themselves playing.
Yeah, well, that's becoming more and more accessible for people as esports grows. I mean, it's insane. I mean, Fortnite, which for a long time was one of the biggest games in the world, it might still be actually. They set a precedent by offering, I think they had $100 million in just for prize money for esports for a year. So the company of Fortnite, Epic Games, they literally just said we're gonna drop $100 million just for prize money for people who are participating in esports. So it's becoming definitely more and more of a thing. I know in Korea as well has a massive esports industry, really, and that I've heard that sports here in like football here in the U.S. is like esports in Korea, which is just it's crazy to think about.
Yeah, but the difference again is what they're trying to do. See, it's like the Viking Capitals hack, meaning they're trying to turn what we're saying is the fun of video gaming into another form of like passive TV entertainment. So you're just sitting there watching other people play video games while like you're eating pizza and having beers, which I think goes against like I mean, it's one thing to watch like people on YouTube who play really well and then you learn, right?
Well, I will say I would actually, I think I see what you're saying here, but I actually think it's the opposite. I think that creating such a large esports industry, the people who participate in esports, those are the best of the best. I mean, they're the greatest. They're the best gamers in the respective game that they play in the world, typically. And I think what that does is it draws people in to say, I want to play that good. I want to play this game. Look at how good these people are. But that's an interesting point that you bring up about esports and turning what video gaming is into this kind of passive, just you're sitting back, you're watching, I don't know if you have to I don't really know. I don't. So
Well,
I
I
don't.
mean, all that money could go into prizes you win when you can win the game, like, so if it's prize money, more people would compete, I guess, professionally because the draw, the stakes would be high.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. And,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, and that's what esports. I think that's what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to draw more and more people. They don't want esports to be just this kind of fringe thing that a few, hardcore gamers do, and they make some money here and there. They want to turn it into a full-on sports and entertainment industry.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Sinatra, that's his kind of game, his handle. He's a Overwatch player. He plays this game called Overwatch, and he went on Jimmy Fallon. He's like 17 years old, or when he went on Jimmy Fallon, he was 17 years old, and he had made hundreds of thousands of dollars winning the international championship for Overwatch. He's 17 years old, and Jimmy's talking to him, and he's like, "How much do you play?" And he's like, "Well, I got to play 8 to 10 hours a day. It's like a job. I have a coach. There are practices. It's a serious commitment, and people take it extremely seriously." And I think it's starting to gain that same kind of recognition in the mainstream as well. I think
the respect, right, where you invest in it, and then you have, but it does take, financial reward, like prize money, but also respect, right? So that, social respect, right? So, I mean, think of like the aura of like getting an Olympic medal and like being an Olympian. So that type of aura, because it's the same time commitment and like workout, mental workout commitment that's needed, right, to be the best in the world at anything.
Yeah.
So that kind of like, respect and recognition, I think would go a long way toward making it a more, kind of like normative cultural practice.
Yeah, and I think it's difficult for a lot of people to get behind that who don't have the same exposure to video games and how many people take it seriously. It's hard for people to get behind it because when they think of video games, they just think of like just some person sitting behind a screen, twiddling their fingers on, and it doesn't have the same, I think, visual. It doesn't bring the same visual awe that like gymnastics in the Olympics would, or any sport really. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I think in the mainstream, it's difficult for people to give esports and gaming that same kind of recognition because they don't really know what's going on in the game. And when they look at people, they're just sitting behind a screen, doing this with their hands.
Yeah. I personally love it. I mean, for that reason, I don't know what's going on when people play football. I wasn't raised in this country, so it wasn't like integral, like it didn't come as part of my upbringing. So, I understand soccer because I was raised in Europe. I never understood what they're doing there. I can appreciate what they're doing because I see the speed, and even if you've played like Nintendo for 2 hours, you know how much, you suck when you start. You got to get to that level of again, it's, well, that's one of my questions, but what I admire a lot is the speed and the coordination. Yeah, but one of my questions is what makes a good video game player?
Well, that I just do it casually. It's just one of my hobbies. I mean, there are times where I play a lot, as you know, but I don't think there's one answer to that question. I think that there are a lot of different genres of games, and they bring. You have to have a different skill set for each game, or it depends on what game that you're talking about. So, I think one thing is, I mean, I can only speak from my experience. I play a game called League of Legends, and I play a game called World of Warcraft. And for a long time,
just to interrupt you for a second, right now, the number one popular game in the world is League of Legends, and the number 2 in the world is World of Warcraft.
Really?
Yeah, and number 3 is Minecraft. So I think you're qualified.
that's definitely the international presence. I mean, the presence of League of Legends and World of Warcraft in Asia and EU is really, really strong. And the World Championship for League of Legends brings a huge crowd and brings a lot of money, and it's a huge event essentially that goes on for like a month.
It's a mental game that's
absolutely.
That's post-lingual, So yes, you can be from another country and not speak English and play baseball if you know the rules. But again, that's like the grunt, right? The body. So this is a way to interact, mentally and not have to use language, which I like, because language is so corrupt. So it's nice to be able to get out of it.
Yeah, and I think also one thing that people might not understand about some of these video games that we just mentioned, World of Warcraft or League of Legends, or these two specific ones that have the largest appeal internationally and in the world. But I think what people don't understand is that they're like serious team sports. I mean, you have a team of people. At least in League of Legends, you have 5 people on your team, and you have to be. I mean, the professional players are coordinated in an insane way. I mean, their coordination, it's just spectacular. Overwatch, another game which also has a lot of international appeal, is the same thing. It's six players on each team. So I think in the mainstream, people don't really understand the complexity and the intensity of these kinds of team games, which require the same level of cooperation and synchronization that like football would or soccer would. Really, it does. I'm not just saying this as a gamer. I like sports too. I'm a huge basketball fan. I've played basketball in high school, and the level of cooperation that you need to succeed at a high level in both these sports really is comparable.
And do you the teams stay the same? So you play with your team consistently?
No. They change. I mean, it depends. So if you're wanting to compete in a tournament, let's say, and League of Legends, the developer, they have these kinds of every month or so, every couple months, they have a tournament setting where you win little like in-game stuff. But if you want to compete at a serious level, you typically will play with the same group of people. I mean, the professional teams, they have a roster. They typically have their main 5. It's just like other sports. They have like
sports. There is a coach and there is a quarterback kind of
coach,
thing.
And there's a starting lineup, and then there's a backup lineup if one of the starters doesn't feel like playing or is I don't know, I can't play for some and it's but if you're playing casually, which is what most people are doing, you're queuing with random. You can queue with the same group of people, which is what I do. I typically queue with the same 4 people. But if you're just playing by yourself, it'll just queue you with random people. And you can talk with them and you can chat with them.
So you're interacting with them, you're talking with them while you're playing, kind of like coordinating what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Typically it's in a chat you type, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Twitch is like YouTube in a sense, except that it's live streams. It's pretty much all live video. And the event that AOC wanted to do is, I think she wanted to appeal to a younger crowd and get people to vote from a younger age. So she did this kind of Among Us, which is a trending game in the world, and especially here in the U.S. She did a Twitch stream, so like a live video event, where she played this game Among Us with Representative Ilhan Omar, with other really popular, notable Twitch streamers as well. And this was kind of an unprecedented thing, at least on Twitch. and it was, I think it was one of the most viewed video streams ever, I think, on Twitch. It had like, I think like 700,000 concurrent viewers or so, maybe more. So you 700,000 people all at once watching.
Right, that's really cool, yeah.
With Twitch in general, I mean, we can see the internet is completely taking over what cable television was. I mean, I feel like most people will just go on Netflix to watch movies. I feel like for younger generations, cable television is not really, it's irrelevant, essentially.
Yeah, me too. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I'm not even the younger generation.
Yeah.
It's just never done anything for me.
So I think what we're seeing is essentially Twitch is the newest manifestation of what television was for me growing up. At least I had people growing up
in the previous century. Yeah, in the 20th century. Yeah.
Yeah.
What makes a good video game? I did read that video games can take up to nearly 700 hours to complete, right? So that I wondered, well, it seems to me as an outsider that the longer it takes to get through, the better the game, because like it's a better like value for your money, right? If you can finish it in like 20 hours, let's say, it's not as, to me, as an outsider. But then I looked up the titles, so it seems like Call of Duty World War II takes 22 hours to beat. And Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, whatever that is, takes 693 hours to complete. And yet, again, from the outside, I never heard of Monster Hunter before, but I definitely heard of Call of Duty. So, like, my logic of, like, the market economy is misleading me.
Yeah, so this is something that I've kind of noticed as someone who's in gaming, since they were 7 years old. So I have I think I have a pretty good understanding of kind of the arc of the gaming industry from, the early 2000s to now. What you're seeing, and you think that, basically it's a little bit more complicated than that. Obviously, because the quality of the game it's very relative, depending on some person might like a particular game, might like Call of Duty a lot, even though Call of Duty is kind of this cash cow franchise where they produce one every single year. So the most popular games, League of Legends, Minecraft. Minecraft's a single player game, but I think most people play it multiplayer. So when you're saying to, your kind of understanding of what makes a quality game is, how many hours you can get out of it, essentially. So
well, yeah, of like pleasure, of like dopamine hits.
Exactly.
Before you buy a new one.
Yeah, and while you think Call of Duty takes, 22 hours to complete, whereas Monster Hunter Worlds is 600 and something. It's not actually as simple as that, because Call of Duty, I don't know really much about Monster Hunter, but Call of Duty, which is an online game, while the single player story might take 22 hours, you can play online infinitely. It's a team of a certain number of players, and you can just play games and infinitely and play against each other. Essentially, it's not a set story. It's each game is different.
I understand. Yeah. So depending who you play against, like the possibilities are endless, because it's unpredictable what they'll do, and that's part of the beauty of like human interaction instead of like artificial intelligence interaction, right?
Yeah. Exactly. But I think there are very, at least for me, it's easy for me, I think, to determine a quality game, like what makes a good game. And one easy way I think that you can to do that is that there are certain games, Call of Duty, which is, I think, the most popular example, where they come out with a Call of Duty every single year. Every year, they make a new Call of Duty just to sell it, just to make money. And there's a basically a controversy within the gaming community, and most people recognize that Call of Duty, while they're fun to play and you can kill a few hours just running around as a soldier basically and killing people essentially and fighting and basically experiencing like a Michael Bay movie interactively. You're the soldier running around. The quality of the game is not the developer's priority, I think. And I think most people think this because they have to produce one every year. And there's also a serious tension between the developers of the games and the publishers of the games. So Activision, which is a large video game publishing company, I don't exactly know how the bureaucracy works, but they have some ownership and stake in developers, essentially. And they can say, you have to give us our game by November, essentially. And if you don't give us our game, well, you just have to, essentially. If you don't, you'll be fired, you'll get in big trouble. We'll find somebody who will. When you're talking about the quality of the game, that, in my opinion, it detracts from the quality of that particular game. But that's just my opinion. There are lots of people who love it. I mean, Call of Duty is one of the most popular games in the United States. It's huge. So lots of people really, really like Call of Duty just because, people game for different reasons. And I know we're kind of going on a tangent here, but I think, you can talk about quality of a game in different ways. You can talk about the artistic quality of a game, the innovative quality of a game, and then you can also talk about, what the game does for players. So, like for Call of Duty, I mean, that's just, if you want to just get your kind of competitive spirit and just kind of play and against people and, talk smack to people online and just, have a good time with your friends, then a lot of people, I've had a lot of great times on Call of Duty. But if you're looking for a single player, if you're looking for a world or a story to get lost in, that's very different.
Right.
So,
but like,
and I personally equate the quality of the game, I think, more with these kind of single player, artistic, story-driven games than kind of online competitive. I think the quality, they have different qualities, and the overall quality of the game is different in both cases. But one thing that's really interested me in this kind of new era of gaming is just how the market and capitalism and just the profit-driven motives of game companies have really tarnished the gaming industry in a lot of ways. And you see this by, I'm sure maybe you've read some articles about microtransactions and how games, publishers and developers will release games, and the main goal and aim of the game is just to get young kids to accidentally or purposely buy these little microtransactions, these little in-game things that you can purchase. And there are also games.
Well, yeah, like when years ago, like what was that called? Penguin or something? That little, world where...
Club Penguin.
Yeah, Club Penguin. Yeah, like buying fake shit, which encourages pleasure from acquisition. It encourages capitalism just basically because you feel good. The pleasure, the mental, dopamine comes from acquiring stuff rather than from skill or adventure or, whatever other reward. Yeah. So, I think a good game, like all games are clearly designed to entice people to play them, right? That's like their raison d'etre, right? So I assume that's their main job.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
but,
yeah.
and they have to be like hard enough to keep you coming back, but not so hard that you kind of give up and go to like what you know. So those are like two givens. But I'm interested in like the thing of like how they connect you to electronically. Basically, we depend on like broadband to connect electronically and do it together, and to gameplay, to continue, right? To continue this like interaction. So I think that to me, as you know, I feel that it's in general it's very positive, because it allows especially young men in the age of like finding themselves and individuating, and from puberty onward, basically, to do that, to sublimate, to do that in ways that are more metaphorical or intellectual than physical and brutal, right? So the whole kind of like history of the patriarchy depended on this basic assumption that women have the reproductive, like the procreative advantage, but men have the physical and aggressive advantage, right? So men are more powerful and also more, let's say, warrior-like. That's the whole testosterone, right? So in a sense, for thousands of years of patriarchy, young boys would become men through some kind of savage, brutal passage, right? Or other, whether it would be like scarification or going to war or just a draft, being drafted to go to the army, which is still happening in most of the world, not in America anymore, but, after a lot of protests. But basically, it was always kind of like separating the boy from, let's say, the mother, and from all feminine attributes, emotions and whatnot, and kind of like forging a warrior, a kind of like aggressive, winner versus loser, machine, who would then naturally, feeling like empowered through this ritual, having passed this ritual and become like heroic, would feel entitled to kind of like own, a woman and the fruits of her womb, right? So that's the whole setup. I'm strong enough, and so I feel that the culture is massively changing. I believe for the best. Thanks to this, because it is liberating, male and masculine identifying people from this sort of like, ritual, like socialized obligation, this duty. Speaking of call of duty, right? So your call of duty now can be done with your hands, through the screen, kind of like, sublimate it this way, rather than by shedding like blood and gore and, gutting each other, right? Or calling each other out to duels or whatever people did, in, territorial fights. All of that can be kind of experienced metaphorically. And as you grow, while you continue to play, as you grow, you come into your maturity, having experienced a lot of these things, like competitiveness, aggressiveness, even kind of like, sexism, where like you objectify a female, but she's just an avatar. Who cares, right? You go through all of that, and, by the time you're mature enough and kind of like fully grown in your 30s, you have learned it, but you have not learned it at the cost of human, lives, of a lot of suffering and oppression and injustice. So yeah, it doesn't, the rite of passage doesn't have to happen that way. And so if you look at it not from like a lifetime span or a lifetime perspective, but from the generational or multi-generational perspective of, let's say, the 21st century, which isn't actually even enough, because the creation of patriarchy took something like 5,000 years. So we're not even talking about, needing 5 more millennia. But even like, let's say from now, the beginning of the 21st century to the 23rd century, I feel that by the 23rd century, the influence of these ways of sublimating, masculine identifying, rituals or behaviors will be felt organically, because, it's kind of like a role modeling. So look how slow like the herd immunity is, which is nothing. This in comparison, right? It's not such a fundamental like human behavior as like, the patterns set by fathers or mothers or warriors or heroes or like movie, actors, right? So all these figureheads, the myths, the stories, all that, the stuff that we've been raised on, which is meant to condition us to be a certain way. So to kind of like allow us that consciousness, that higher consciousness, where we are aware that we have a choice at all times and that we choose to act one way or another. I think that, the video games open that up, that they open that kind of space where you, even as a teenager or as a young man in your 20s, can experience being really angry and aggressive and competitive and wanting to kill and destroy your opponent, and feeling really high and happy from that. And then the game ends, and a second later, you're like, hi honey, I missed you. What are you up to? Or do you want to order some food? So the shift in behavior from one to another with such fluency is allowing a much greater consciousness of there is another, I that's in charge. There is I get to choose who I am. I don't have to be fully 100% invested in either one. I don't have to choose from one extreme to the other. I don't have to live in like either I'm passive or I'm aggressive. Either I'm masculine or I'm feminine. Either I'm like tall or I'm short. I'm good. I'm bad. Like all of this. Patriarchy is created by defining meaning as difference. So getting away from that and opening up space for us to contain our contradictions every minute, and accept them, I think is like the transformation into a more enlightened, human. And it will take a long time, but I do feel that, the internet is facilitating that. Not social media, but definitely practices like, video gaming. And I think that the general, opinion is changing in that way too. Because I remember that like, even the pediatricians, way back then, and, the authority figures used to like warn us all, the addiction, video game addiction, and how do you cure it, and bring your kid to like my place to make sure they're not addicted. And I feel that now, recently, there has been kind of like a change, a slight change and improvement, in normative attitude, even though, again, like, in my opinion, gaming like doesn't serve the purposes of the patriarchy, so it will do what it can to like, co-opt it, and so, excessive gaming will be something that is discussed, and people will talk about like, oh, it creates like lack of motivation, or it creates like, dopamine exhaustion, or, emotional suppression. And that's such, I think, mumbo jumbo, bullshit, because, right, real life, you can feel when real life is happening.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely those stories of people who take it to the extreme and play inordinate amounts of video games. And but I understand. I mean, I guess that video game addiction is a thing, I guess. But I think that there is a lot of good, and we've talked about all the kind of positives that gaming brings, that I feel like people don't really talk about, or they don't think about gaming in the way that we are thinking about it right now, at least in this conversation, about systemically, how does gaming kind of change the trajectory of these masculine tendencies and masculine attributes, toxic masculine attributes. This is definitely not something that's going to be discussed. And I know, some of the most notorious kind of negative takes on video games is that, like, shooter video games like Call of Duty, they directly they directly affect the minds of young kids, and they make them more violent. This has been disproved.
It's been disproved. Yeah, it's like giving kids like toy guns. Come on.
Yeah, it's not real. But I mean, of course, everything in moderation. I mean, you can't. Video games are absolutely bring lots of positives, but you don't want to lose sight. We were talking about there are two worlds, there are two realities. This is the reality of gaming, where we've kind of identified that basically men. There's a female gaming community as well, but men. And non-binary as well. But men can kind of exercise their inherent toxic masculine behavior of conquering and destroying and dominating in this one world, and then the shift and the break from that world to the other reorients them, essentially. Reorients them and gives them a better understanding of themselves in reality, as opposed to themselves in video game reality.
Right.
You don't want to lose sight of yourself in reality because you're so lost in video game reality. You understand what I'm saying? There's always a balance.
Oh yeah, you're not gonna miss reality. You're not. These people are like, you're not gonna be hungry. You're not gonna have to go to the bathroom. You're not gonna. It's just, I think it's just to me, I think it's like kind of like a little resistance. I mean, from what I've experienced, partly, from watching you play and kind of like admiring it on many levels, I think that it improves your coordination, it improves your focus. It's an extraordinary degree of focus, which like maybe in the olden days we had, reading, or I don't know what, it takes so much focus, but it's the focus that you need like to land an airplane if you're an air traffic controller. It's like high level focus, which, again, I think that's like an important skill, and memory, because you have to memorize, if you're going to move up, right? But also like, I like the information, just like the knowledge. I like it. It's kind of like a playful, fun way to learn about mythology. Like when I Google my name, Eurydice, it's like Eurydice and Hades. It's a game, and it comes up. The whole first page of Google. It's about these characters in the game, and that pleases me incredibly. I don't think it's necessary that everybody has to know the story of Eurydice that was told, like 5 or whatever it was, 3,000 years ago, maybe 2,500 years ago, right? I think it's totally cool that her story changes, right? And that it's still there. There's still the underworld that you're navigating, right? so I think that a lot of that, like just the names of avatars and what they do, speak of our cultural heritage. It's a way of kind of like embodying those roles, those archetypes, those mythic characters that otherwise, the generation before didn't get to. So unless you would like imagine that with your imagination while you were reading these stories or like comic books, you didn't get to pretend that you are like, a Trojan warrior or, or some other mythic, character. So I think that also, those characters and myths were created to teach us things, right? So when you embody them, right, like when you play different roles, you learn different things in a sense about maybe even aspects
Absolutely.
of yourself.
It depends on the game, but when you're talking about bringing these kind of myths and stories that were created and written to teach people something about life and embodying these stories and creating an interactive adventure, an interactive experience, a world that you can truly live out these stories in an entirely different world. I mean, it's spectacular. But of course, as far as different roles, it really depends on the game. And there's so many different games. There's so many different expressions in video gaming, and it's really it's spectacular. I mean, I don't even know the game that you're referring to, but there's a whole world out there of I know the one very popular franchise is the Assassin's Creed franchise, and it was largely based in these ancient realities where you run around as this assassin, which is a fictional character, but you run around in these very real historical contexts. So you can go visit the Hagia Sophia, when it was first constructed as this assassin or something.
Right. In the Middle Ages, yeah.
Yeah. This is one particular franchise, and I don't know how many video games are out there that are historically accurate and embody these kinds of these stories and these myths. Right. But
well, I hear you change. I mean, you played all kinds of different characters within the same game a lot, and some are female identifying, and some are male identifying, and some are like wizardly, and some are more monstrous. They have like kind of master-like attributes. So in a sense, you're practicing being all kinds of other, selves or entities, right? Besides the one normative one you present to the world, right?
You're referring, I think, to League of Legends specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, I think, the game that you've had the most exposure to through watching me play. But no, absolutely. Yeah, there's over 100 different characters that range from, they range from a rock monster to this, knight, to this, massive masculine knight, to this, feminine, wizard, feminine witch. Essentially, there's all kinds of different characters that you can play.
Right, and as you play them, a tiny part of you learns how to be that way. So you're not stuck being only you. You know what I mean? Like, I feel that it liberates.
Absolutely.
Right. It gets you out of the extreme stereotyping that we were brought up in.
I think the game that would demonstrate this more is actually the other game that I play, which we alluded to before, World of Warcraft. That game, you literally create an avatar, a character that can be, it can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a dwarf. It could be this alien creature. It can be, well, not whatever you want it to be. There's a variety of different characters that you can create, right, where you pick. You
can
pick
be like a temptress, a vixen, like super sexy girl, or
whatever.
or
Yeah, yeah. There's a set number of different races essentially that you can choose from, but races, not in the sense that what we think about, but really
right.
in this mythological universe where you can be a minotaur. That's a race. They're called the Taur.
That's so cool.
Be a goblin. That's another race. You could be a a Draenei, which is like this alien kind of creature.
Yeah.
And you can be, and so this is that game. You really are creating another version of yourself in this world, and you can
try that out for a while.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
I think psychologically, it's just enormously, useful. It's just compared to like how daily life, the options that we were allowed in our daily life until this. So I think it's one of the best things that the internet, has done. And I hope that the kind of like, online and entertainment, whatever it's called, industry, it becomes, more accepted and normative, and I definitely feel that 2020 has helped a lot that way, because since so many young people were like stuck at home, right? Then the online games with friends became their most like basic, interaction, like the way to satisfy the most basic, social, psychological needs. So it created more acceptance, social acceptance, because parents and other authority figures like were encouraging young people to stay away from each other and lock down and socially isolate. So they kind of like gave them more permission to interact online in games. And online, people have like full control of your virtual identity, which doesn't happen in real life. In real life, there are all these ancient, antiquated, kind of like, obsolete rules of behavior that we're still going by just because they made sense, 1,000 or 100 or 500 years ago. What's proper? And the only thing that's proper is what used to be proper, which makes no sense anymore, but still, like, we're told, that's how we behave, right? So you learn that you can have full control of who you are, which I think it's like, it's pretty extraordinary, and real life kind of robs us of that for a long time. You have to like break a lot of rules and travel and get away from your home place and your language and your culture, and go in and out of cultures to begin to understand, that we all have agency, and we don't need to obey. We just don't need to obey. So I think it's one of the, of the perks of COVID-19 is this realization. And, there was a study, the Oxford Internet Institute, and they found that people who play online games with friends for long periods of time report feeling happier than those who don't. Period.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, having an outlet to hang out with. I mean, I don't know if this was the study done over COVID or.
Yeah, it's a current study, so that's
Of course, because I mean, right now because of COVID, I don't really hang out with my friends in person. We hang out online in an online kind of chat application called Discord, where we hang out in there for hours. And, when we have free time, even when we're not playing video games, we just hang out in there and we talk, and I'll be, writing or doing homework or whatever, studying, and I'll just be in the Discord hanging out with people. It's great.
Yeah. It's like, it's a little like house party, but it allows you to, Yeah, and what they reported specifically was that if they play 4 hours a day, I mean, imagine, this used to be like anathema. 4 hours a day, every single day, they feel significantly happier than those who don't. Not just
I've
if they themselves don't, but also people who like have never played. So compared to non-game players,
I've definitely played 4 hours in one day before, and it's great.
yeah, yeah. It's like I don't know. I think it's the way of the future. Thank you for your time. Thank you
Of
for
course.
your knowledge and your wisdom.
The little knowledge I have as a long-time gamer, I guess now.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, you do.
the last thing that's important to say is that I think that gaming, there's a lot of positives with gaming, with the world of video games, artistic positives, positives that come from having a better understanding of yourself and where you're and reorienting yourself to the world around you by existing and living and conquering in this other world. But you don't just, I think it's important to play, but also play in moderation. And what I mean by that is, I think this is important. It's more important for younger people, I think, for kids, because I think that if, at least for me, I started playing video games when I was like 7 years old, maybe even younger. My parents were very, at a young age, they were very strict with my gaming. It's not that they didn't let me game. I played lots of video games as a young kid, but they really instilled in me the importance of, the video gaming is one world, reality is another world. It's always important to prioritize the real world and have and grow in the real world as well as in this, digital world. And I think if that is established at a young age, then I think as you get older, you can play as many video games as you want, and I think it'll only be good. I think it only brings happiness and it only brings good, as long as you have that kind of that foundation. If you build a foundation at a young age of understanding yourself and your position with this digital world, which can be very enticing, it can be very overwhelming, it can be incredibly fun, and then also growing in reality. Yeah, that's my last word about video games. That's my opinion.
Yeah, you can't neglect like your intimate life, whether it's when you're a child with your, parents or your siblings. I think they're pretty noticeable. And, as you grow older with, your partner, it's definitely not the same as having intimacy, as being like, touched or known in person. But it is it is a way to replace a lot of our, more general social interactions with the world at large, I feel. So that's, what to me, is great, that it doesn't really take the place of intimacy. It doesn't give you those pleasures of being, felt, but it does replace all kinds of like expectations that we have been given about who we should be in the world. So you can do those things in online, and it takes less out of you than having to do them in the real world, and even more so now during a pandemic. So yeah, I think like combining it with a life in nature, like getting some fresh air and getting some oxygen, and getting a walk in the woods, or going to the ocean, or having a girlfriend or having a boyfriend, that sort of having a family, that sort of thing. That's kind of like a balance. That's definitely needed. So no, we're not like advocating only living in video gaming
Absolutely.
lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I,
Perhaps
you
it
know,
was really, it was a blast.
yeah. I'm a fan, and I have only like the greatest hopes, about all of this lifestyle. So that's it.
Yeah.
And everybody out there, until we speak again next week, keep speaking sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God.